Hey everybody, this is Nick. Today we're going to also discuss a little further into the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. This bill is under attack in states like Maryland. It's already taken full effect. So in Maryland, they have fully repealed the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights. Today we're going to watch a video of WPRI, a news outlet in Rhode Island, that discusses Rhode Island repealing the same bill. The reason why we're talking about this is because it is a big deal. This Law Enforcement Bill of Rights is what protects officers from civil liability during the course of their duties. It also protects them from being charged with criminal offenses during the course of their duty. We're also going to look at how the feds are getting involved now in the Chauvin case, and they have, I don't know if they superseded him, but we have to see what exactly happened, because now the feds are getting involved, claiming that there's a civil rights violation. The message here, the point that I want to just clear up, this is pretty much directly targeted at those who are in law enforcement or support law enforcement. It's a very dangerous time to be a police officer, and the future of policing is definitely pretty grim right now. Just because if you're a police officer and you go to work and something happens that day that's not what you expected, which is about every day, at which point are you susceptible to risking your family's security, monetary security? How far can you go and continue to go, risking everything that you have to protect everybody in society? And if something were to happen, you would be the bad guy. I think that that's something that's pretty intimidating. It's important to keep these officers safe. And I was talking to someone the other day about it. I spent 9 years in law enforcement, and I recently got out. Now I just work kind of in a part-time diminished level. But I can tell you right now that it's definitely not what it was. And where it's going is bleak. And I don't want to be a part of that. The militarization of police is something I've been skeptical about. But now it's not even about what the police are doing. It's just about how society views them. And I'm sure that it's not the majority of society that's making these shots. It's these, thugs. It's these people in society that don't have any concept of what the real world is that are making these shots. If we look at cities like Baltimore, they've lost, I think, 20% of their police force. The crime rate is through the roof. They had like 183 shootings and however many murders. It was high. Same thing with Chicago. And I'm not going to get too political because I frankly don't care. But common sense says if you live in Baltimore, you may want to leave because more police officers are going. And your city is then going to become even less safe than it is now. Do you want to live in Chicago? People talk about Chicago like it's this beautiful city. I'm sure in parts of it is beautiful. But they have a serious crime issue. They have a serious gun issue and the toughest gun laws in the country. So as we look at that, it kind of says, well, shouldn't we be protecting officers to the max? They're going into a place where the shootings are happening like crazy. We need to put an end to it. We know how to put an end to it. We've had crime bills in the past succeed at lowering crime rates in the community. But today, I'm going to pull up this video here from the news outlet for you guys to see. And just keep in mind that what's happening in Rhode Island, what happened in Maryland is going to knock on your state's door. It's definitely spilling over, and how much time has to go by before we recognize this problem. Do you know what I'm saying? How much time has to go by before we recognize it? Anyways, let's get into this quick news outlet here. This is pretty interesting.
Providence's African American Ambassadors Group is asking for the repeal of Rhode Island's Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. Mayor Jorge Alurza is speaking out, saying he supports it too. 32 states across the country have already made its move, and supporters here say repealing LEOBOR would give police chiefs the authority to take appropriate action to officers' offenses. 12 News reporter Chelsea Jones has the details on the group's call to action.
One mother tells me her son is a victim of police brutality, and repealing LEOBOR means getting rid of the bad apples in police departments nationwide.
I've struggled with not being able to understand why that the officers, which were several of them, that beat my son beyond recognition on a basic routine traffic stop.
Suzette Cook says in March of 2013, her son was brutalized by police.
Let's talk about this for a second. I just want you guys to use common sense as you look at this. I just want you to use common sense. I'm not asking you to think outside the box. I'm asking you to use common sense here. As we look at this guy, Joshua Robinson, basically what they're saying is, and if you see what the picture says, on March 15th, 2013, Josh was allegedly stopped for a traffic violation. All right. Do you think that Josh, by looking at this picture, or that police in general, drove by Josh, observed him, he was following the law, everything was perfect, and all of a sudden, a cop decided he was going to pull this guy over for doing nothing and beat the shit out of him? Is that what you think happened? Just be honest with me. Is that what you think happened? Because I can tell you right now, the answer is no. That's not what happened. Just like all these other cases where everyone's getting stopped, they're always on police activity with something. You know, maybe if you just listen to the police officer, give you simple instructions, you wouldn't have gotten tuned up like this. And I'm not saying that's what happened. He probably fought with police. They were probably trying to restrain him. He might have had a warrant. You know, there's a big story behind this that we're not knowing. And they're going to put this picture because it's horrific. This is a terrible looking picture of what happened to Mr. Robinson. But we don't know how he ended up getting to this point. And in fact, if he did get to this point just for driving down the street, then that's a problem. But this alone, it is not correct. It doesn't tell you the full story. This doesn't tell you the whole story. This tells you one aspect of it. They show you this gruesome picture. Is it possible that this was police brutality? Yes. But does it necessarily mean it was police brutality? Not at all. We don't know what happened, what threat level the police officer was at. The police don't go to work every day to get killed or hurt. They go to work to defend the Constitution and enforce the laws that are on the books.
He says they kicked him, beat him with a flashlight, dragged and maced him. Then one of the officers involved.
Not even 2 weeks later, a promotion.
All right. So they kicked and maced him. Why? Because he was driving down the street? Or was he fighting the police? For them to say, you know what I got to do? I got to take out my OC now. I got to spray this guy. You're at a point where that cop definitely didn't want to get into all that. Definitely didn't want to do all the paperwork for all that. So I don't believe this, not even a second, that this guy Robinson was just an angel driving down the street. This guy had done something and then continued to do something that led up to him being maced and allegedly kicked. Okay? There's no evidence. We didn't hear about this. We don't know what the officer side is. There's no camera footage on here. I'm just making, based on my experience and common sense, this guy definitely wasn't just driving down the street and the cop said, let's pull him over and beat him up. That didn't happen. And that doesn't happen, quite frankly.
These are things in which that are not acceptable.
She, Providence's African American Ambassadors Group, and a few state senators are calling for the full repeal of LEOBOR.
This can be done, and it needs to be done. Right now, Rhode Island is the only New England state with such a bill on its books.
According to the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, accused officers who face disciplinary action face a panel of 3, one chosen by the officer in question, one by the police chief, and the last is a neutral party. There are also rules that help determine what is and isn't shared with the public. The repeal would strip all of that.
I want to discuss one thing here. This is officer discipline. This is not for criminal matters. This is for discipline issues. So the same board that would see tardiness, poor appearance, possible suspension for something that an officer said, or a use of force review that finds that the officer did something out of policy, would go through this process. But if an officer breaks the law, then they would go through a legal process, and that would be reviewed with the public and everyone would know about it. This is making it seem like, well, every time an officer does something, even if they, like what they did with Mr. Robinson, if they use force or something, this is the process. Well, this may be the internal process. There's still a legal process that exists within the courts. So this really skews what we're looking at and what we're talking about and how it really works. This really makes it one-sided. We don't hear the other side of this, and it's a real disappointment.
Away.
Repealing the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights isn't about punishing or abolishing cops necessarily.
That's exactly what it is. You're punishing police. You're telling police, you're saying, listen, we don't appreciate you. We don't want you in our communities. We want to police ourselves and have total anarchy.
It's about making sure that the folks in our society who we give the most authority to interact with us on a daily basis also have the most accountability.
The Rhode Island police chief.
I would like that dude to go out and patrol with a police officer or be a cop, sign up for 3 months, see what it's like.
Organization responding to this call for action, saying they are actively participating in discussions about reforming the Bill of Rights, not necessarily a full repeal. Supporters say they marched all summer for change and they want to see it happen now.
It is insulting when people tell us that justice can't happen right now, that we have to wait. We waited an entire summer to see the systems change, and they didn't.
Now, if you remember, Mayor Jorge Alor.
Why didn't they change? Right? If the public was in full support of this, it would have changed. A small section of the public feels this way, not the majority. That's why it didn't change. Let's face the facts here. The majority of the public support the police, but a small faction want it abolished. But that small faction is growing. The small faction is growing into the politicians. So now you have these crazy politicians in the state of Rhode Island. We're trying to run the roost down there and change everything. That's fine. But if Rhode Island turns into the next Baltimore, you want to leave.
Formed this African-American ambassador group to improve accountability and transparency within the city. He gives this statement of support that reads in part, Leobor places unnecessary hurdles on police chiefs' ability to discipline their members and limits what information can be made available to the public.
They kind of think that police chiefs are more than mere mortals. You don't think that police chiefs have guys and girls that they want to just terminate from their department just because? This process is in place so that the police officer can't be retaliated against for doing their job. It's common sense. I don't understand why this is such a big deal. This is common sense. This is a bill that protects police officers from retaliation from the police chiefs. Gives them due process to do their jobs and feel represented adequately.
I'm Chelsea Jones, 12 News.
Thank you, Chelsea. I think that was just pretty sad. And we look at this Chauvin case here real quick. A federal grand jury indicted 4 former officers on civil rights charges in the death of Minneapolis resident George Floyd. You know, so what? Now these guys are going to have to go through this again? I feel like if the feds wanted to take over the case, they should have done it from the beginning or charged him with the civil rights violation in the past. I'm not saying what he did is right. I'm just saying that they're not using the utmost integrity to discuss or review how these cases come to be. It's almost a tragedy. So that comes to the end of this video today. I saw these 2 things and said I need to make a comment on it because it's gross and lascivious and probably shouldn't exist. These police officers shouldn't even be going to work at this point. While we need them out there to protect us and maintain peace, it seems like these police officers are risking more than it's worth for a salary. You guys have a good day.